The morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns across the worn hardwood floor of my grandmother's kitchen. I stood by the sink, gently squeezing the rubber bulb of the blood pressure monitor wrapped around her thin arm, watching the numbers rise. My name is Lauren Bennett. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in the same creaky old house where I was raised, now caring for the woman who once raised me. Your hands are shaking again, Grandma, I murmured, trying to keep my tone light. Eleanor Bennett, 80 years old and proud as ever, gave me a scowl that could slice through steel. Because that thing is lying again. No way my pressure is that good. You and that machine are both wrong. I chuckled. 130/80. That's astronaut material. She huffed, clearly disappointed that the numbers didn't confirm her current act of being at death's door. My grandma had a flair for drama and a deep-seated belief that if she didn't make noise, the world would forget she was here. She shifted upright in her chair, adjusting her scarf like a queen preparing for court. Back in my day, we didn't need gadgets to know how we felt. I can tell my heart's racing. Must be over 200. Then I guess you'd better sit still, or I'll be calling 911, I teased, placing a plate of toast and scrambled eggs in front of her. At that, her face softened a little. You wouldn't dare. You're right. I wouldn't give the ER nurses the satisfaction. They still haven't forgiven you for that time you faked chest pains just to get your wedding ring cut off. Her shoulders shook with laughter she pretended not to have. That ring was stuck and I wanted it off. Nothing fake about that. We fell into a familiar rhythm. Her nitpicking, my deflection. It was how we'd always been, especially since I'd moved back in after Mama passed and Daddy moved to Alabama for work. I worked mornings at St. Juniper's clinic, afternoons part-time at a small urgent care downtown, and evenings at home with Grandma. She insisted I was doing too much, but she loved the attention. You know what I was thinking about last night, she said suddenly, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. How much I want to live long enough to hold a great grandbaby. I glanced at the clock. 7:20. I still had time. You've told me that every Sunday since I turned 25, Grandma. And I'll keep saying it till you make it happen. You know what they say, if a woman lives to rock a great-grandchild, her sins get wiped clean, like a Southern baptism with diapers. That's not how redemption works, I said, but I was smiling. She leaned in, narrowing her eyes. So, anyone new I should know about? I hesitated for just a moment too long. Grandma caught it. Aha, I knew it. Don't you dare say it's nothing. Who is he? I sighed, still unsure whether it was too soon to say anything. But something about the glint in her eyes, the same glint she had when she caught me sneaking cookies at age 7, made me cave. His name's Mark. Mark Bennett. She blinked. Same last name. I shrugged. Total coincidence. We're not related, I promise. And we've been seeing each other for almost a year now. Eleanor's face bloomed into something between smug and thrilled. You tell your mama? You're the first person I've told. That seemed to please her even more than the breakfast. She patted my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. Lauren, if this Mark boy's as good as he sounds, you'd better keep him. Don't let life pass you by. I nodded, tucking the moment away in a quiet corner of my chest. In that warm Savannah kitchen, with the kettle whistling and the trees outside shaking off the last of spring, I let myself imagine it, the life she wanted for me. A family, a future, a kind of peace I hadn't dared hope for in years. Little did I know that peace was already hanging by a thread. At work, I often joked that the front office of Coastal Care Billing smelled like desperation and burnt coffee. Maybe it was the old carpet, or maybe it was just the way people's dreams shriveled up under fluorescent lights and Excel spreadsheets. I worked 3 days a week there, just enough to keep my foot in the door and my insurance active, reporting to a woman I used to call my best friend, Savannah Reed. We'd known each other since high school. She was the girl with the loud laugh, shiny lip gloss, and a talent for talking her way out of gym class. I was quieter, more the planner, the keeper of details. Somehow opposites stuck. We shared lockers, clothes, even boy crushes once or twice, until life pulled us in different directions. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I just didn't see it happening. "Why are you glowing like someone proposed?" she asked, plopping into the chair beside me and nudging my elbow with hers. I gave her a look. "You've been watching too many rom-coms again." "No, seriously. You've got that someone walked me to my car and settled the right things face." I sighed. "If you must know, Mark and I had dinner last night. It was nice." Savannah's mouth twisted into a smirk. "Nice? That's it. Come on, I know your nice means you didn't sleep, you just floated on a cloud of man cologne and promises." I rolled my eyes, but she wasn't wrong. Savannah had met Mark once, very briefly. It was last fall, during our office's poorly planned Friendsgiving. He dropped off a pumpkin pie, kissed my cheek, and vanished like a gentleman. She watched the whole thing with the same look she gave clearance sales at designer stores. Intense, predatory, slightly amused. "Still driving that navy pickup?" she asked, almost too casually. "Yeah. Must be nice. Guy's got stable hands and a decent job. Looks like he could lift a sofa without complaining. He's not a piece of furniture, Savannah." She leaned back in her chair, twisting the edge of her gold bracelet. "I'm just saying, some of us are out here collecting emotional damages and weak backbones. Meanwhile, you've got a man who actually answers your texts and opens doors. That's rare." There it was, the edge, the thing she never said out loud but always implied, that I had something she believed belonged to her. I wanted to shake it off, to remind myself this was just Savannah being Savannah, but something in her tone stayed with me all day. Later, as we typed in silence, she spoke again, her voice low. "You know, it's weird." "What is?" "You and Mark. I never thought you'd go for someone like him." "Someone like?" She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. Clean cut. Boring, maybe. Predictable." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I realized something in that moment, something sharp and uncomfortable. My best friend, the girl I had laughed with in locker rooms and cried with over ice cream pints, had stopped rooting for me a long time ago. Somewhere between our teenage daydreams and adult disappointments, the thread that held us together had thinned, and I wasn't sure it could hold much longer. And still I smiled, pretending not to notice, because letting go of someone you've known half your life doesn't happen in one day. It happens in pauses, in looks, in offhand comments disguised as jokes, and I wasn't quite ready to face it yet. It was a Friday night when Mark suggested we catch a movie downtown. There was this little art house theater just off Whitaker Street that still ran foreign classics on real film. Not digital, not remastered, just pure, grainy reels with subtitles and scratchy audio. Mark knew I loved those. "Something Italian," he said. "You'll pretend to read the subtitles, and I'll pretend I understand the plot." I laughed. Deal. I wore my favorite burgundy dress, the one Grandma Eleanor always said made me look like a Southern debutante with a secret. We were supposed to meet at 7, grab popcorn, and maybe some of those awful licorice bites I only ate out of nostalgia. But at 6:58, my phone buzzed. "Savannah, guess what? I'm downtown too. Just got out of happy hour. Want to meet up?" "I'll come by. I've been dying to see something tragic and artsy." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply, but 2 minutes later she texted again. "Almost there. Don't ditch me." By the time I turned the corner, Mark was already waiting, standing near the glowing marquee, hands in pockets, looking every bit like someone from an old romance film. And there she was, already by his side. "Lauren!" she called out cheerfully, like this was always the plan. Mark smiled when he saw me, but his expression flickered. Just slightly. Not annoyance. Not anger. Just confusion. "Didn't expect we had company tonight," he said, softly when I reached him. "Yeah. Last minute." I murmured, then turned to Savannah. You sure you want to sit through subtitles? She grinned. I can handle foreign men mumbling about lost love and cigarettes. Inside, the seats were creaky. The theater smelled of popcorn butter and dusty velvet. We sat in a row, Savannah in the middle, like it was her date night too. Throughout the film, she whispered commentary. Loudly, she gasped at plot twists, laughed at scenes that weren't funny, and at one point, she even kicked off her heels and propped her feet on the seat in front of her. Mark didn't say a word, but I saw the way his jaw tightened. I saw how he stopped reaching for my hand halfway through the second act. When the credits rolled and the old projector rattled to a stop, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. Wasn't that deliciously depressing? Savannah sighed. So, when are we grabbing drinks? I know this cute rooftop bar on Bay. Mark shook his head. Actually, we were thinking of calling it a night. Oh, she said, blinking innocently. You two always so early? Mark turned to me. Can we walk a little? I nodded. Savannah waved dramatically. Fine, lovebirds. Don't be surprised if I crash your wedding one day. We smiled politely. I didn't look back. Outside, the Savannah night was warm and thick with humidity. Spanish moss swayed over the sidewalks like ghostly curtains. The only sound for a block was the clicking of my heels. When we reached one of the park benches under the old oaks, Mark stopped. You okay? I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, just wasn't the night I pictured. Me neither. A beat. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. I was going to do this over dinner, maybe with candles or something less weirdly chaotic, but screw it. It's us. He pulled out a small navy box and opened it. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, was a ring that sparkled like the Savannah River at sunset. Lauren Bennett, he said, eyes not leaving mine, will you marry me? I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I laughed, half from nerves, half from pure joy. Yes, I whispered. God, yes. He slid the ring onto my finger. Somewhere distant thunder rolled. And maybe it was just me, but it sounded almost like a warning. They say the first year of marriage is the hardest. But for us, it felt like drifting through honey. Everything was golden, slow, and impossibly sweet. Our tiny house off Magnolia Street may have creaked with age, but it felt like home, ours. I filled it with candles and soft blankets. Mark stocked the pantry like we were preparing for winter in the mountains. We didn't have a honeymoon. We didn't need one. Every morning felt like waking up to something sacred. Every night ended with a laugh muffled into the pillow. I still worked part-time, mostly at the urgent care center. Mark was doing well too. He had started supervising maintenance crews for a property group downtown, which meant steadier hours, better pay. He even stopped bringing home his muddy boots. Our routines felt ordinary, comforting. And then Savannah came by. She didn't call first, didn't text. Just showed up one Sunday afternoon with a bag of cookies from some overpriced bakery on Bay Street and the smell of expensive perfume trailing behind her. I was in leggings and Mark's oversized t-shirt, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. She looked like she'd stepped out of a department store ad. Well, look at you, she said, surveying the living room with a crooked smile. Cozy little cottage. I thought you'd moved into something fancier after snagging Mr. Tall and Silent. I laughed, but something about her tone made the air feel less warm. Mark offered her tea, ever the gentleman. She declined, wrinkling her nose like the thought of store-brand Earl Grey might burn her tongue. For 10 minutes, she talked nonstop about her promotion, her new car, her brief entanglement with some local real estate guy. She barely looked at me, but every time Mark spoke, she turned her head sharply, eyes gleaming like she was tuning in to something only she could hear. When she finally left, I stood at the window, watching her strut down the walk in her heeled boots. You okay? Mark asked, sliding an arm around my waist. Yeah, I said, but I wasn't sure. That was the beginning of it. Not the beginning of the end. No, not yet. Just the shift, the first ripple in still water. That visit happened just weeks before I found out I was pregnant, though I didn't know it at the time. Over the next few months, I saw Savannah less and less. Part of it was work. We were both busier. Part of it was me. I didn't reach out. Something unspoken had passed between us, and I didn't know how to undo it. Then came the surprise. The 2 pink lines. I stared at the test for a full 5 minutes before letting myself believe it. Mark held me in the kitchen, both of us barefoot and stunned. He cried. I didn't. I just held on to him and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And we were, at least for a while. Savannah found out at work. She brought me decaf from the cafe downstairs and forced a smile. "A little baby Bennett," she said, voice tight. "How traditional." I thanked her. She patted my hand like she was blessing me before a long, difficult journey she had no intention of taking herself. Weeks passed. My belly grew. Mark built a cradle from scratch, sanded it every weekend until it gleamed. Grandma Eleanor started knitting booties with tiny, mismatched buttons. Savannah never asked the due date. She never came by again, but her silence was louder than any word. The office didn't look any different the day Savannah got promoted, but everything shifted. Her name appeared in bold on the glass door. Savannah Reed, head of accounting. A new plaque, a new pair of heels, and a very new tone of voice. I wasn't surprised she got the role. Savannah had always known how to talk to the right people, laugh at the right jokes, sip the right wine at the right fundraiser. She was a natural fit for middle management. The only thing unnatural was how fast she stopped being Savannah the friend and became Ms. Reed the boss. It started small. "Could you proof that again, Lauren? Your numbers look a little rushed." Or maybe just take the calls today. "You seem a bit tired lately." I was tired. I was in my 3rd trimester. My ankles swelled like balloons, my back ached before lunch, and the baby had a habit of kicking right as I tried to balance invoices. But I kept showing up, because that's what you do when you're building a life. One afternoon, my fingers trembling more than usual, I knocked on her office door. Her new glass office with fake orchids and inspirational quotes framed in gold. She didn't look up. "Savannah," I said softly, "do you have a minute?" "Not really, but if it's important, for early leave." I spoke to HR. They said if I got supervisor approval, I could begin maternity leave 2 weeks early. "Just to what?" she cut in. I blinked. "To rest. My doctor said the swelling's gotten worse. They're a little concerned about my—" Savannah let out a breathy laugh, the kind that was neither kind nor amused. "Lauren, we're closing out year-end reports. Everyone's stressed. I've got 3 interns crying in the hallway. You think now's the time to vanish." "I'm not vanishing," I said carefully. "Just asking for a bit of flexibility. It's only, you'll leave when the system says you're allowed to. That's the policy. I don't make the rules." But she did. Everyone knew she did now. I stood, legs shaking more from anger than fatigue. I'd known this woman for nearly 2 decades. Shared secrets, heartbreaks, and hairbrushes. And now she was looking at me like I was a stranger taking up too much space. I reached the door when she said it. "Oh, and Lauren." I turned. Her eyes glinted, smug, cold, almost gleeful. "All that happy glow you walk around with? Don't flaunt it so much. Some of us have to work twice as hard without a husband baking us casseroles and building us cribs." I didn't reply. I just left. I made it down the hall, into the stairwell, and crumpled. Not from her words, but from what came after. That night I started spotting. The pain was sharp, sudden. Mark rushed me to the hospital. They kept me overnight. Said I needed bed rest. Said my body was crying uncle. "You're pushing too hard," the doctor said, her tone gentle but firm. "Rest, or risk more than stress." So I rested, and in that quiet I thought about friendship, how it can bloom like jasmine in spring, or rot like forgotten fruit in the heat. And sometimes the person you trusted most with your heart becomes the one swinging the blade. Grace came into the world on a Monday morning, just after a thunderstorm rolled over Savannah. I remember lying there in that sterile white room, clutching the bedsheet like a rope as my body split open to let life in. And it wasn't just pain, it was terror, hope, awe, 1,000 things at once. She didn't cry at first. For the briefest, longest moment of my life, silence. Then, like a ribbon tearing, her voice, weak, high rasping, but there, alive. I sobbed. Mark held my hand so tight I thought my fingers would bruise. We looked at each other with eyes wide like children. Glass bassinet, tubes already snaking from her tiny nose. She looked fragile, more spirit than skin. Just a precaution, the nurse said. But I knew, the way the doctor hovered, the way they kept whispering in the corner of the room. Something was wrong. 2 hours later, they confirmed it. She has a congenital heart defect, the doctor said gently, her hands folded like she was delivering a eulogy. A severe one. We'll need to keep her in NICU. She can't breathe on her own yet. The words cracked through me like frost on glass. Mark stood frozen. What does that mean? Is she dying? No, the doctor said quickly. Not if we act fast. She'll need oxygen support. And very likely, surgery. Possibly more than one. The first will happen in a couple of weeks, if she's strong enough. Surgery. On a baby that weighed 6 pounds and barely had a heartbeat loud enough to find. I didn't cry. Not then. I went still. Numb. Like my body had decided not to feel anything else until it was safe to come back. They didn't tell Grace. Of course not. But somehow she knew. She fought like she had something to prove. Her eyes, when they opened, were dark and ancient, like she'd already lived 1,000 lives. Mark came every day to the hospital. At first, he brought flowers, snacks, even a small stuffed lion he said was a little fierce friend to guard her crib. But somewhere between the second surgery consult and the endless insurance calls, something shifted. He started checking his phone more, started lingering in the hallway instead of coming into the NICU. Then came the day we brought her home. We had prepped for weeks, cleared a corner of the bedroom, installed the oxygen tank, rearranged furniture so I could reach her with just one step. I'd memorized the medication schedule like a prayer. I wasn't just her mother. I was her nurse, her guardian, her around-the-clock defense system against the odds. The first few weeks were quiet, exhausting, sacred, and then the fever. It started 2 days after a neighbor's daughter came by with a handmade rattle. She hadn't been sick, not visibly, but toddlers carry storms in their skin. Grace's breathing grew shallow. Her tiny chest heaved like she was drowning on dry land. We raced back to the hospital. This time they didn't say just a precaution. This time they said serious risk of respiratory failure. Mark stood beside her crib for 10 minutes, then left to make some calls. He came back 3 hours later. By then, Grace was stable. For now. We sat side by side in plastic chairs outside the NICU. He didn't speak. Neither did I. There was nothing left to say, only what would be said later. In louder ways. In crueler rooms. But that night, we just listened to the beeping of machines, to the hum of survival, and to the quiet unraveling of something we once called a marriage. There's a silence that settles over a house when love starts to rot. It's not loud, not explosive. It's the silence of two people sharing the same space but breathing in different dimensions. The clink of forks against plates. The hollow thud of footsteps overhead. The way he stopped saying goodnight. Mark changed slowly. At first, it was exhaustion. I'm just tired, he said. I can't do the late-night feeds. I've got meetings. You're already home all day anyway. Then frustration. Why does she keep crying? Didn't they fix her? Fix her. As if our daughter were some broken appliance that refused to work right. I didn't fight him. Not yet. I thought if I just held it all together, if I stayed calm, reliable, unshaken, he'd come back to himself. To us. But I was wrong. The day it cracked open, the sky was unusually bright. I remember because I had Grace bundled against my chest in the sling, her breath soft against my collarbone, and sunlight filtered through the window like gold mist. Mark came home early. He didn't take off his shoes, didn't kiss my cheek, just stood there at the threshold, jaw clenched like he was bracing for impact. I can't do this anymore, he said. I didn't move. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. This house, this crying, this version of our life, it's not who I am. I didn't sign up to be a full-time caretaker of a sick kid and a wife who doesn't smile anymore. I looked down at Grace. She blinked up at me, her little lips pursed like a question mark. Are you leaving? I whispered. He didn't answer right away, just walked to the hall closet and grabbed his overnight bag. I've been seeing someone, he said without looking at me. Savannah. The name hit me like a slap. Savannah from work. He nodded. She gets it. She sees me. She makes things feel light again. Light. That's what he wanted. Not love. Not depth. Not loyalty. Just something weightless. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked past him, into Grace's room, and closed the door. He left that night. No goodbye to his daughter. No explanation. Just the sound of his tires on the driveway gravel and the long, low silence that followed. I sat on the nursery floor with Grace in my arms, rocking gently, listening to the wind outside and the hum of the oxygen machine. That was the moment I realized something important. He wasn't coming back, and I didn't want him to. Not the man he'd become. Not the man who looked at his daughter like a burden. Not a miracle. But what I didn't know then was that he wasn't just walking away from us. He was walking into something darker, something calculated, and I wouldn't find out until much, much later that leaving us was just the beginning of his plan. The weeks after Mark left were a blur of formula stains, medical charts, and silence. But there was also something else, breath. I hadn't noticed how tight my chest had been until he was gone. The air felt cleaner, lighter. Even with the grief curled in the corners of my room like shadows, I could finally exhale. Grace kept me grounded. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. Her gaze, sharp, soulful, never wavered. She was a fighter, and because of her, I had no choice but to be one too. We moved out of that suffocating house. I rented a small carriage apartment just off Jones Street, with creaky floors and ivy climbing the windows. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I found work at a local print shop that understood when I needed to take calls from the pediatric cardiologist or rush home early if Grace's oxygen levels dropped. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It was healing. Art found its way back into my life in quiet ways. A sketch here, a watercolor there. I'd paint after Grace fell asleep. Her monitors softly blinking in the background like lullabies. My hands remembered more than I expected. The curves, the color, the language of emotion rendered on canvas. And then one night, Cassidy came over with a bottle of cheap wine and a look in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "There's a community exhibit next month at the River Street Collective," she said, plopping down on my paint-stained couch. "Submit something. You need this." I laughed. "I haven't shown in years." "You haven't breathed in years. Come on, show them who you are now." And so I did. I painted 3 pieces, all of them quiet, all of them strong. They weren't about heartbreak or betrayal. They were about resilience, stillness, the sacred quiet after the storm. Opening night was warm and golden, the gallery filled with string lights and soft jazz. I wore a navy wrap dress that made me feel like I still had a waistline, and I even let Cassidy do my hair. Grace stayed with Miss Moira, the retired fortune teller from down the hall, who treated her like royalty. People looked at my art, stopped, felt. It was like a part of me had been asleep, and now it was stretching its arms in the sun again. Just when I thought nothing could break the peace of that evening, I turned toward the doorway, and there he was, Mark. He looked older, sharper around the eyes. His suit was pressed, his shoes gleaming, but something in his posture sagged. My heart didn't skip. It didn't shatter. It just waited. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice cool as the gallery's tile floor. "I saw your name on the exhibit flyer. I had to see it for myself." I crossed my arms. "You could have sent an email." He looked down. "I've made mistakes, Lauren. That's one way to put it." He stepped closer. "Savannah and she left. Months ago. Said she wasn't cut out for real life. And I couldn't stop thinking about you. About Grace. I want to be part of her life." The audacity of it. He hadn't called. Hadn't sent a birthday card. Not even a text when Grace had her 3rd surgery. And now he wanted in. After all the heavy lifting had been done, I stared at him for a long moment. Then I smiled. Not out of kindness. Out of clarity. "You don't even know what her favorite color is," I said softly. "And I think that tells me everything I need to know." He flinched, and I turned away. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Mark didn't walk away. Not without trying one last time to reclaim what they'd thrown away. And he hadn't shown his hand yet. I didn't hear from Mark for weeks after the gallery. Part of me hoped that confrontation had been enough, that the silence that followed meant he'd crawled back into whatever corner of the world could stomach his excuses. But deep down I knew better. People like Mark don't come back for closure. They come back for control. It started with a letter. Not from him. From a law firm. Something about shared custody and the best interest of the child. The words were dressed up in politeness, but the threat underneath was sharp and unmistakable. I brought it straight to my lawyer, a steady woman named Judith who wore combat boots under her pencil skirts and had no tolerance for manipulation. "He doesn't have a leg to stand on," she said. "He abandoned his daughter. No judge in Chatham County's going to side with that." Still, the stress settled into my bones like damp air. Grace was old enough now to pick up on energy, and she started having nightmares again. I hated that his shadow could still touch her, even from afar. Then came the press release. Prominent architect returns to Savannah with vision for family and community. There he was, Mark, posing in front of a render of a fancy riverside condo project, arm around a smiling real estate executive, and tucked in the article like an afterthought. Mark Bennett, a proud father reuniting with his daughter Lauren Grace, plans to establish deeper roots in the city he once called home. Proud father? He hadn't seen her in a year. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about Grace. Not really. It was about optics. His new company, he was trying to build a family man image. Use us as props to soften the edges of his ambition. I was furious. But more than that, I was done playing nice. I reached out to a friend of Cassidy's, an investigative reporter who owed her a favor. I didn't feed her dirt. I fed her facts, hospital records, missed court-ordered support payments, emails, texts, proof of abandonment. She published a piece titled, "Image Over Integrity, the Man Behind the Renderings." It didn't scream scandal, but it whispered just loud enough to ripple through the circles Mark was trying to impress. He showed up at my doorstep 2 days later, not angry, smiling. That slick, plastic smile that used to charm boardrooms and break apologies in half. "You didn't have to do that," he said. I opened the door just wide enough for him to see my eyes. "Oh, but I did. Because you don't get to rewrite the story anymore." His jaw tensed. This could have been good for Grace. "No," I said, voice steady. "This would have been good for you. She's not a prop. She's not your redemption arc. She's a human being. And you don't even know what color her bedroom walls are." He didn't speak. "Let me make this simple," I continued. You stay away. You stop using her name in interviews. You drop this charade, or I'll go back to the press with everything." For a moment, I saw the mask slip. The real Mark, raw and cornered. He didn't lash out. He didn't threaten. He simply turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. There were no courtroom battles, no tearful reunions, just a quiet ending to a story that should have never been his to control in the first place. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. But more than that, I felt free. A year later, I stood on the front porch of our new home, small, white-trimmed, with shutters the color of summer peaches. Grace was inside, napping with her favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm, and the late afternoon sun poured through the windows like liquid honey. Everything smelled like lavender and lemonwood polish. There were no headlines, no grand pronouncements, just life soft and unfolding. The gallery had offered me a permanent spot that spring. My Resilience series had struck a chord, and suddenly I wasn't just a woman who'd survived something. I was an artist again. People came to see the work, but more than that, they came to feel it. And in those quiet moments between canvas and I felt seen too. Cassidy had stayed in my life, fiercely loyal as ever. We'd sit on my back porch with sweet tea and old Fleetwood Mac records, laughing over nothing and everything. She said the house felt like it breathed, like it was always exhaling peace. And maybe that's what healing is. Not a moment, but a space, a place you build brick by brick, word by word, painting by painting, until it holds you gently and says, "You're safe here." Grace grew stronger. Her heart surgery is behind her now. She was a whirlwind of curls and questions and giggles that bounced off the kitchen tiles. She loved to paint beside me, always in purple, always with glitter. She'd say things like, "Mama, let's draw a dragon who's kind," and I'd nod because I knew exactly what she meant. I didn't date. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But there was something tender in that choice, too. A declaration that I didn't need a love story to be whole. That sometimes the greatest romance is the one you write with your own breath, your own hands, your own life. Still, on warm Saturdays, I'd find myself wandering the stalls at the River Street flea market. I wasn't looking for anything. But one morning, I stumbled across a man selling antique cameras. His name was Daniel, and he had gentle eyes and a voice like slow jazz. We talked about lenses and light and how some moments are best captured by memory. He didn't ask for my number. I gave it to him anyway. We met for coffee the next week. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it begins again, not with a bang, but with a quiet cup of coffee on a slow morning, when you've already made peace with yourself and someone simply fits into the rhythm you've built. I don't know where the road leads next. I just know that wherever it does, I'm not afraid anymore. Because I have grace. Because I have grace. Because I finally gave it to myself.